chapter 7. And we have a couple of chapters we're going to cover tonight. Very good stuff. Look at verse 1 here. It says, "For this Melchizedek or Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High Elohim, who met Abraham as he was returning from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him." Now, in order to set the scene here for this chapter, we're going to take a running start and look at chapter 6, verses 19 and 20, where we read, "This hope we have as an anchor of the soul, a hope both sure and steadfast, and one which enters within the veil, where Yeshua has entered as a forerunner for us, having become a high priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek." Now, I say the word Melchizedek. It's some people have said it's Melchizedek. Now, Zedek, what does that word mean in Hebrew? Righteousness. What's Melech? King. That's why I want to say Melchizedek. But the Hebrew language may not quite work that way. Well, the end of the last chapter leads us into this chapter by discussing how Yeshua is the anchor of our soul and our high priest after the order of Melchizedek. Now, Melchizedek, he's an interesting guy. Yeah, it says he was a king. He's introduced to us in Genesis just early on. And Abram had just rescued Lot and Lot's household from the armies of Kedar Laomer. And he's the king of Elam and three other kings. So Abraham was actually a battle general type of guy. He was very good at it. Now, upon his return, he is greeted by the king of Sodom and by Melchizedek or Melchizedek. And Melchizedek is the king of Salem and priest of the Most High Elohim. That's in Genesis 14, verses 18 through 20. "And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. Now he was a priest of Elohim Most High. And he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram of Elohim Most High, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be Elohim Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand. And he gave him a tenth of all." Let's go on to verse 2. "To whom also Abraham apportioned a tenth part of all the spoils, was first of all by the translation of his name, King of Righteousness, and then also King of Salem, which is King of Peace." So Abraham paid a tithe to Melchizedek. And it's another evidence that the Torah of Elohim was already there. It's eternal, not only for the future, but in the past also. Now, the name Melchizedek, it means King of Righteousness, and he has this title also, King of Peace. Verse 3. Speaking of Melchizedek, without father, without mother, without genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like the Son of Elohim, he abides a priest perpetually. So the writer of Hebrews says he had no father or mother. He had no genealogy. It doesn't talk about his beginning, doesn't talk about his end. It would appear that he is a manifestation of Elohim himself. It says he remains a priest continually, and we're going to pick that up in Psalm 110 also. Because we don't have a lot of information on this guy. Just not a lot of information.
Is he a priest and a king?
Yeah, a priest and a king, which is interesting. Verse 4. "Now observe how great this man was, to whom Abraham the patriarch gave a tenth of the choicest spoils." Now, so Paul wants us to consider how great this man was. Abraham, the father of all of Elohim's people, paid him great homage and even paid him a tithe. He pays this guy, this Melchizedek, a tithe. Verses 5 and 6. "And those indeed of the sons of Levi who receive the priest's office have commandment in the Torah to collect a tenth from the people, that is, from their brethren, although these are descended from Abraham. But the one whose genealogy is not traced from them collected a tenth from Abraham, and blessed be the one who had the promises. Now, the proof that the priesthood of Melchizedek is greater than the Levitical priesthood is in the fact that Abraham paid tithes to him. Now, the Levites are sons of Abraham, and they're not greater than Abraham. They're sons of Abraham. As a matter of fact, the Levites, as well as many nations, are blessed through Abraham. Look at verse 7. But without any dispute, the lesser is blessed by the greater. So Abraham, the father of the Levites, was blessed by Melchizedek, the greater, long before the Levitical priesthood was established. Look at verses 8 through 10. And in this case, mortal men receive tithes, but in that case, one receives them of whom it is witnessed that he lives on. And so to speak, through Abraham, even Levi, who received tithes, paid tithes, for he was still in the loins of his father when Melchizedek met him. Now, Paul states that the Levites essentially paid tithes to Melchizedek through their forefather Abraham. The Levites would receive a tithe from the people. Then the Levites would pay a tithe of the tithe to the father. In Numbers 18, starting at verse 25. Then Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, Moreover, you shall speak to the Levites, and say to them, When you take from the sons of Israel the tithe which I have given you from them for your inheritance, then you shall present an offering from it to Yahweh, a tithe of the tithe. Okay, now let's take a look at this here. The author of Hebrews, which I believe is Paul, he says Melchizedek is greater than Abraham, who's greater than the Levites. Let's see why he says this. Well, now, Abraham was blessed by Melchizedek. Abraham paid his tithe to Melchizedek. So he's honoring Melchizedek, and Melchizedek blessed him. Now, the blessings come from the top down. Therefore, Melchizedek was greater than Abraham. The Levites collected tithes from the people and paid their tithe to Elohim. And the Levites, we're talking about a priesthood there, that at that time didn't even exist. But when they collected their tithe, they paid a tenth of that, of their tithe, to Elohim. The Levites essentially paid their tithe to Melchizedek through Abraham, since the Levites came from Abraham's loins. So we have that Levitical priesthood that essentially gave their tithe to Melchizedek. So in determining things about this person, this priest, Melchizedek, like you said, he's a king and a priest. Very interesting. And he receives the tithe of the Levites. So who would he be? Who received the tithe of the Levites? Elohim. So I think that solidifies he's a manifestation of the Father. Now people say a pre-incarnate Christ. No, I'm sorry. No, I don't think so. Possible. But just because the Father manifests himself in a human form doesn't mean it has to be, Yeshua every time. Okay? He can manifest himself as Charles too if he wants to. So that's just him. I will just go by what the evidence shows here. I think it's a manifestation of the Father. Verse 11 of Hebrews 7. Now, if perfection was through the Levitical priesthood, for on the basis of the people received the Torah, what further need was there for another priest to arise according to the order of Melchizedek and not be designated according to the order of Aaron? Now, you look at the way this is stated here. For if perfection was through the Levitical priesthood, for on the basis of the Levitical priesthood, the people received the Torah. The people received the Torah because it was taught through the Levites. Okay? Through through that priesthood. Now, perfection or completeness could not be achieved through the Levitical priesthood. Why not? Because they're imperfect. Okay? They're not perfect. The Levitical priesthood was men that were flawed. Why would the high priest have to give offerings for himself first before he could offer for the people? Because he's flawed. He's not perfect. If we could get perfection through the Levitical priesthood, what was the need for one greater than the Levites to honor a greater priesthood? Because they did. The Levites, through Abraham, honored a greater priesthood. Verse 12. For when the priesthood is changed, of necessity there takes place a change of Torah also. See, this is one that Christians will point to and say, see, the law changed. It says there's a change in the law. You say the law doesn't change. It says right there, there's a change. Well, it appears that it's stating that since the Levitical priesthood changed, there's a change in the law, because a lot of the law is about the Levitical priesthood, right? That's not really what it's saying here. Look at the word change. That's where I looked first. What's the key word here? I know the law doesn't change. That term changed. It's metatithemi. Okay, it means to transfer. And then to change is metathesis, which means a transferal. There's not a change, there's a transferal that's taking place here. There are examples of how those same words are used elsewhere, and it doesn't mean change. It means transfer or a transferal. So it reads different. For when the priesthood is transferred, of necessity there takes place a transferal of Torah also. Take a look at Acts 15 or 7 verses 15 and 16. And Jacob went down to Egypt, and there passed away, he and our fathers. And from there they were removed or transferred to Shechem and laid in the tomb which Abraham had purchased for the sum of money from the sons of Hamor in Shechem. See, the word change would not at all fit there. And it doesn't really. Change does not really fit at all. In Hebrews 11 verse 5, by faithfulness Enoch was taken up so that he should not see death, and he was not found because Elohim took him up. Metathesis. Okay? He transferred him. For he obtained the witness that before his being taken up, he was pleasing to Elohim. So to say this is pointing out that the Torah was changed is not true. So let's look at this a little bit closer. Now, the Levitical priesthood, the Levitical priesthood was a transferal also. Who did they take the place of? The firstborn. That's exactly right. They're a substitute for the original priesthood, which the original priesthood was of the firstborn. In Exodus 13, starting at verse 11. Now it shall come about when Yahweh brings you to the land of the Canaanite, as he swore to you and to your fathers, and gives it to you, that you shall devote to Yahweh the first offspring of every womb, and the first offspring of every beast that you own. The males belong to Yahweh. But every first offspring of a donkey you shall redeem with a lamb, but if you do not redeem it, you shall break its neck. And every firstborn of man among your sons you shall redeem. And it shall be when your son asks you in time to come, saying, what is this? And you shall say to him, with a powerful hand Yahweh brought us out of Egypt from the house of slavery. And it came about when Pharaoh was stubborn about letting us go, that Yahweh killed every firstborn in the land of Egypt. But the firstborn of man and the firstborn of beast, or both the firstborn of man and firstborn of beast, therefore I sacrifice to Yahweh the males, the first offspring of every womb, but every firstborn of my sons I redeemed. So, it's the firstborn of all the sons that were to be originally in service to Elohim. In Numbers 8, starting at verse 14, we read, thus you shall separate the Levites from among the sons of Israel, and the Levites shall be mine. Then after that, the Levites may go in to serve the tent of meeting, but you shall cleanse them and present them as a wave offering. For they are wholly given to me from among the sons of Israel. I have taken them for myself instead of every first issue of the womb, the firstborn of all the sons of Israel. For every firstborn among the sons of Israel is mine, among the men and among the animals. On the day that I struck down all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, I sanctified them for myself. But I've taken the Levites instead of every firstborn among the sons of Israel. And we know why he took the firstborn of the sons of Israel initially. He owned them. He saved them. Okay? He saved all the firstborn of Israel. So he said, you guys are going to be in service to me. And as they got in the wilderness, he said, instead of them, I'm going to have the Levites do this. We're going to transfer this priesthood. We're going to transfer it from the firstborn to the Levites. Now, substitution or transferal, that's a common principle allowed in Torah. Elohim allowed Abraham to substitute a ram for his son Isaac. Remember that? If people were not wealthy enough to have lambs or bulls to sacrifice, they were allowed to substitute turtle doves or pigeons or even grain, flour. Elohim allowed his son to be our substitute, to pay the sin penalty. Substitution is allowed in Torah. Transferal is allowed in Torah where Elohim allows it. Elohim is not at this time using the substitute priesthood of the Levites. He's using the original plan of the priesthood of the firstborn. Okay? We read in Colossians 1, starting at verse 15. And he is the image of the invisible Elohim, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created, both in the heavens and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things have been created by him and for him. And he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. He is also the head of the body, the assembly, and he is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, so that he himself might come to have first place in everything. So our high priest is Yeshua, Messiah, the firstborn of all creation. He's following the priesthood of Melchizedek, who also had no beginning or end, and he was the original priesthood of the firstborn. This transferal or change is merely reinstating the original priesthood of the firstborn. Does that make sense? And we'll go into why here. Why is this necessary? Verse 13. For the one concerning whom these things are spoken belongs to another tribe from which no one has officiated at the altar. For it is evident that our master was descended from Judah, a tribe with reference to which Moses spoke nothing concerning priests. And this is clearer still if another priest arises according to the likeness of Melchizedek. See, regardless of the fact that Yeshua came from the tribe of Judah, he's still our high priest. What tribe did Melchizedek come from? He preceded the tribes. He has no genealogy. He has no beginning. He has no end. And he's a king and a priest. How is our high priest going to serve on the earth as what two offices? King and priest. And that's also talked about in Ezekiel chapters 40 through 48. It talks about the prince will officiate the offerings that are done and how he'll be king also. Verses 16 and 17. Who has become such not on the basis of a law of physical requirement, but according to the power of an indestructible life. For it is witnessed of him, you are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. You see, he didn't come into the priesthood because of a written commandment, which is what happened with the Levites. But it's according to the power of an endless life. Elohim called Messiah a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. Now that's in a psalm written by David. It's Psalm 110. And we talked about this before. If you would look real close, you would see that this is probably the most quoted psalm in the Brit Hadashah. Yahweh says to my Adonai, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet. So this is David, and he sees a vision. He sees a vision of the Father and of Messiah. Okay, and Messiah is sitting at his right hand, which is where the power is. That's what it symbolizes. And he sees this, and by the way, how many times does it quote that he would be sitting at the right hand of the Father? I believe it's 11 or 12 times or more in the Brit Hadashah. Where does that come from? Psalm 110. He says, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet. Yahweh will stretch forth his strong scepter from Zion, saying, rule in the midst of your enemies. Your people will volunteer freely in the day of your power. In holy array from the womb of the dawn, your youth are to you as the dew. Yahweh has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. Adonai is at your right hand. He will shatter kings in the day of his wrath. He'll judge among the nations. He will fill them with corpses. He will shatter men, the chief men, over a broad country. You know, Yeshua asked the Pharisees a question. He said, why did David call Messiah Adonai, or Lord, or Master? So this is Messiah. Who's he a son of? They said, son of David. Well, why would he call his son Master? Because this is backwards. And they said, I don't know. Okay? And he wants them to think about it. He wants them to think about it. This was prophesied 1,000 years before the birth of Yeshua. That's how they knew. That's how the writer of Hebrews knew that Messiah would be a priest after the order of Melchizedek, because of Psalm 110. Verse 18. For on the one hand, there is a setting aside of a former commandment because of its weakness and uselessness. So we had to set aside some laws in the Levitical priesthood because of weakness and uselessness. Now, where's the weakness and uselessness from? It's from the priesthood, the Levitical priesthood. Why? Because it's men. Okay? It's weak because it's men. The men are flawed. Church. No, it's the priesthood. Why not? It's in this particular case, the commandment concerning the priesthood of the Levites had to be set aside. It's weak due to the imperfection of the men themselves. Now, there's still going to be a Levitical priesthood in the future, but for now, it has to be set aside. Verse 19, for the Torah made nothing perfect, and on the other hand, there's a bringing in of a better hope through which we draw near to Elohim. The Levites made no one perfect. That was a problem. The Levitical priesthood did not make anything perfect. We needed a better hope and a greater assurance through which we can draw near to Elohim. Now, with the Levitical priesthood, there was a covenant that was done. Remember the covenant? And we're going to talk about it here in chapter 8. Everything you say, we're going to do. Okay, how'd that work out? Not any better than the Levitical priesthood. Okay? There's problems there. There's problems there. We need a better priesthood. We need a better hope. All right, that's what he's talking about here. Verses 20 through 22. And inasmuch as it was not without an oath, for they indeed became priests without an oath, but he with an oath through the one who said it to him, Yahweh has sworn and will not change his mind, you are a priest forever. So much the more also Yeshua has become the guarantee of a better covenant. You know, Elohim made that oath in Psalm 110, that Messiah would be a priest forever. according to the order of Melchizedek. Verses 23 and 24. And the former priests, on the one hand, existed in greater numbers because they were prevented by death from continuing, but he, on the other hand, because he abides forever, holds his priesthood permanently. The priesthood is now unchangeable because Yeshua Messiah is unchangeable. Verses 25 and 26. Hence also he is able to save forever those who draw near to Elohim through him, since he always lives to make intercession for them. For it was fitting that we should have such a high priest, holy, innocent, undefiled, separated from sinners, and exalted above the heavens. See, that's the kind of high priest we need. That's what we need. A high priest that's holy, that's set apart, innocent, undefiled, and separate from sinners. Our sinful condition cannot be handled through sinful man. That's the problem. That's the problem. Or else the offerer is flawed also. Then what redemption is there? Verse 27. Who does not need daily, like those high priests, to offer up sacrifices, first for his own sins, then for the sins of the people, because he did once for all when he offered up himself. So Yeshua doesn't need to offer up offerings, sacrifices daily. He made the sacrifice once, and that was for all of his people. And notice it didn't say once and for all. It says once for all. People tend to misquote that. He was the sacrifice once and for all. No, he was the sacrifice once for all. Okay? Offerings are coming back. All right? Verse 28. For the Torah appoints men as high priests who are weak, but the word of the oath, which came after the Torah, appoints a son made perfect forever. It's abundantly clear that the only law that was set aside was the law of the selection of the priests. That doesn't change any portion of the Torah, since the priesthood of the firstborn was initially set aside for this, before the Levitical priesthood, which transferred to take its place. If this setting aside didn't happen, then how could we, who are not descendants of Levi, become a nation of priests? In 1 Peter 2, verse 9, you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for Elohim's own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who has called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. This was initially promised to the entire nation of Israel in Exodus 19, verses 5 and 6. Now then, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be my own possession among all the peoples, for all the earth is mine. And you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the sons of Israel. This promise will be fulfilled when Yeshua returns, and Israel, all his people, will become a holy nation and a royal priesthood. Let's look at chapter 8, verse 1. They tie together very well. Now, the main point in what has been said is this. We have such a high priest who has taken his seat at the right hand of the throne of the majesty in the heavens. Okay, we have such a high priest. Remember, he said who he is. It's holy, innocent, undefiled, separate from sinners, exalted above the heavens. Excuse me, that's the type of high priest that we have. This is the kind of high priest that's not temporary and is not inferior. He's the high priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. He's seated at the right hand of the throne of the majesty in heavens. And it's probably a scene that we can't even fathom. That picture of him to the right hand of the Father. Verse 2, a minister in the sanctuary and in the true tabernacle, which Adonai pitched, not man. Okay, here's the deal. There is a true sanctuary and a true tabernacle in heaven that was erected by Elohim and not by man. The one built by the Israelites, was it perfect? No. David's a skilled carpenter. David, you ever built anything perfect? No. Fell a little short every time, didn't you? Do good work, though. Do great work. Can't that perfection thing, though. You know, that will elude us. Imperfect. Was this tabernacle permanent that they built? Nope, not permanent. We don't even know where it is now. It was mobile. That's right. You know, it's in this true tabernacle. That's where Yeshua's serving now. That's where he's serving. Verse 3, for every high priest is appointed to offer both gifts and sacrifices. Hence it is necessary that this high priest also have something to offer. Every high priest is to offer both gifts and sacrifices. Yeshua is no exception. Yeshua does the same thing. Verses 4 and 5. Now, if he were on earth, he would not be a priest at all, since there are those who offer gifts according to the Torah, who serve a copy and shadow of the heavenly things. Just as Moses was warned by Elohim when he was about to erect the tabernacle, for see, he says, that you make all things according to the pattern which was shown you on the mountain. Now, if Yeshua were on earth in the day that letter were written, that Hebrews was written, he would not be a priest, because there were already priests who served the copy and the shadow. Okay, what we had as a tabernacle and a sanctuary was a copy and a shadow of the real one. Moses was warned by Elohim to erect the tabernacle according to the pattern which he was shown on Mount Sinai. Okay, that was the real one. Now you're going to make one, a duplicate one. In Exodus 25, verse 40, and see that you make them after the pattern for them which was shown to you on the mountain. Exodus 26, verse 30, then you shall erect the tabernacle according to its plan which you have been shown on the mountain. Exodus 27, verse 8, you shall make it hollow with planks as it was shown to you in the mountain, so they shall make it. Numbers 8, verse 4, now this was the workmanship of the lampstand, hammered work of gold from its base to its flowers. It was hammered work according to the pattern which Yahweh had showed Moses, so he made the lampstand. So all those things, the lampstand, the boards, everything, the altars, the Ark of the Covenant, they were all made from what the real ones that were shown on Mount Sinai to Moses. They were patterned after that. Verse 6, but now he's obtained a more excellent ministry, by as much as he is also the mediator of a better covenant, which has been enacted on better promises. The imperfect Aaronic priesthood was a copy and shadow of the heavenly things. The Levitical priesthood, they had to purify themselves in accordance with the covenant in order to present themselves to Elohim. They couldn't just present themselves. Yeshua has obtained a more excellent ministry. He's not minister under the covenant that says we'll follow Elohim and his Torah under our own power. That's not what he ministers under. Okay? He's the mediator of a better covenant, which has been enacted on better promises that are kept by the Father himself, and not by the imperfect yous and me's. Okay? If we're going to have a covenant that is perfect, then everything else involved with it has to be perfect. That old tabernacle couldn't be it. That old priesthood couldn't be it. Okay? All those things couldn't be it, but they were a model. They were a model of what the real thing is. We are models of what we will be in the same way. Verse 7. For if that first covenant had been faultless, there would have been no occasion sought for a second. You know, if that first covenant was not faultless, well, it wasn't faultless because it was with a sinful people, okay? That was the problem. It was performed with sinful people that had to be cleansed before they could even participate. Even at that, still weren't clean. They were imperfect shadows of what they needed to be. That was the problem. That was the problem. Verse 8, for finding fault with them. He says, behold, days are coming, says Yahweh, when I will effect a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. The new covenant, as described here, is a direct quote from Jeremiah 31. That's why it's all in capital letters. The next 8 through 11 of Hebrews 8 are all in capital letters because it's a direct quote. And it says right here, the days are coming, I will effect a new covenant with who? It's with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. It's not with the New Testament church. It's not with any group or organization. Okay, it's made with Israel and with Judah. And if we're his people, we're a part of Israel. And if you're a part of Israel, you're part of that new covenant. And we are a part of that new covenant if we have a heart for his Torah. Look at Ephesians 2, starting at verse 12. Paul writes, remember that you were at that time separate from Messiah, excluded from the commonwealth of Israel, and strangers to the covenants of promise, having no hope and without Elohim in the world. But now, in Messiah Yeshua, you who formerly were far off have been brought near by the blood of Messiah. Been brought near to what? The commonwealth of Israel. Verse 19, skipping down to it. So then you are no longer strangers and aliens, but your fellow citizens with the saints and are of Elohim's household. Your fellow citizens of the nation of Israel. And then going to the next chapter in Ephesians, verse 6. To be specific, the Gentiles are fellow heirs and fellow members of the body of Israel, and fellow partakers of the promise in Messiah Yeshua through the gospel. Also Romans 11, starting at verse 25. For I do not want you, brethren, to be uninformed of this mystery, lest you be wise in your own estimation, and a partial hardening has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. To what? To Israel. And thus all Israel will be saved. Just as it is written, the deliverer will come from Zion, he will remove ungodliness from Jacob. Why will all Israel be saved? Because Israel will consist of those that are saved. That's why.
Israel's not necessarily a place,
it's a people.
yeah. I mean, as long as we're on the right page.
Yeah, it's a people. Yep. Verse 9, not like the covenant which I made with their fathers on the day when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt. For they did not continue in my covenant, and I did not care for them, says Yahweh. Okay, now, a covenant. A covenant is an agreement, right? But stronger, but it's an agreement. This covenant will not be according to the covenant Elohim made with their fathers when he led them out of Egypt. It's not going to be like that. This covenant is recorded in Exodus 19, starting at verse 1. In the 3rd month after the sons of Israel had gone out of the land of Egypt, on that very day they came into the wilderness of Sinai. When they set out from Rephidim, they came to the wilderness of Sinai and camped in the wilderness, and there Israel camped in front of the mountain. And Moses went up to Elohim, and Yahweh called to him from the mountain, saying, Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob, and tell the sons of Israel, you yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now then, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be my own possession among all the peoples, for all the earth is mine. And you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the sons of Israel. So Moses came and called the elders of the people, and set before them all these words which Yahweh had commanded him. And all the people answered together and said, all that Yahweh has spoken, we will do. And Moses brought back the words of the people to Yahweh. There's your covenant. It was that agreement. Okay? What was wrong with that agreement? The people that made it. Nothing wrong with the covenant, except the flawedness of one side. It's also in Exodus 24. Starting at verse 3, then Moses came and recounted to the people all the words of Yahweh and all the ordinances. And all the people answered with one voice and said, all the words which Yahweh has spoken, we will do. And Moses wrote down all the words of Yahweh. Then he arose early in the morning, built an altar at the foot of the mountain with 12 pillars for the 12 tribes of Israel. And he sent young men of the sons of Israel, and they offered burnt offerings and sacrificed young bulls as peace offerings to Yahweh. And Moses took half the blood and put it in basins. The other half of the blood he sprinkled on the altar. And he took the book of the covenant and read it in the hearing of the people. And they said, all that Yahweh has spoken we will do, and we will be obedient. So Moses took the blood, sprinkled it on the people, and said, behold the blood of the covenant. Isn't it interesting? The blood of the covenant, which Yahweh has made with you in accordance with all these words. It was a covenant that was broken by the people because they were flawed. So we had a flawed people. We had a flawed priesthood. Why? Because the people were flawed. We had a flawed tabernacle. Why? Because the people were flawed. We had flawed implements that were made to do the offerings to Elohim. Why were they flawed? Because the people that made them were flawed. We got problems here. We got problems. See, if we do up in the heavenlies, we have a perfect tabernacle. We have perfect implements. We have a perfect high priest. Okay? We made a covenant, too, to go with the tabernacle, to go with the priesthood, to go with the implements. What was wrong with the covenant? Yeah, what was wrong with the covenant? Nothing. But it was bad. Why? Because of the people that he made it with. So what we need now, we've got a perfect tabernacle. We've got a perfect priesthood. We've got all the implements that are perfect to serve the Father with. We need a better covenant. Okay? That comes. We need a better. What if the covenant made the people better? Wouldn't that be a great deal to get involved in the covenant with the Father to where he makes us better? Okay? To where we don't have to rely upon our own promises and our own New Year's resolutions to get better? Let's see, what is it? Middle of October? I was going to lose 30 pounds this year. I was going to start in December. Starve myself. Pound a day, that's my plan. December, pound a day month. Are y'all going to bet on me? I wouldn't if I were you. Yeah, bet against me and bring beer to the shul. That'll do it. Well, it's the covenant. That covenant was bad because it was broken by the people. They couldn't do it. In verse 10, let's continue here with the new covenant. For this is the covenant that I'll make with the house of Israel after those days. Notice we're united again. It's just the house of Israel now. Says Yahweh, I'll put my Torah into their minds, and I'll write them upon their hearts, and I'll be their Elohim, and they shall be my people. Now, this is the new covenant. He is going to put his Torah in our hearts and in our minds. He does it. This is going to be a work in progress until Messiah returns. It's going to be a work in progress. It won't be entirely fulfilled until he returns. He doesn't choose you and say, okay, now you're perfect. No, that's not how it is. It's a process right now for us imperfect beings because we're still imperfect. Jeremiah 32 verse 40 says, and I will make an everlasting covenant with them. Well, if the covenant's everlasting, what will we be? everlasting. That I will not turn away from them to do them good. And I will put the fear of me in their hearts so they will not turn away from me. Ezekiel 11, starting at verse 17, he states the new covenant also. Therefore, say, thus says Adonai Yahweh, I shall gather you from all the peoples and assemble you out of the countries which you have been scattered, and I shall give you the land of Israel. When they come here, they'll remove all its detestable things and all its abominations from it. And I shall give them one heart, and shall put a new breath within them. And I shall take the heart of stone, the stubbornness out of their flesh, and give them a heart of flesh, that they may walk in my statutes and keep my ordinances and do them. Then they'll be my people, and I will be their Elohim. Also in Ezekiel 36, starting at verse 25, states it again, the new covenant. Then I'll sprinkle clean water on you, and you'll be clean. I'll cleanse you from all your filthiness and from all your idols. Moreover, I'll give you a new heart and put a new breath within you. And I'll remove the heart of stone from your flesh, that stubbornness, and give you a heart of flesh. And I'll put my spirit, my breath within you, and cause you to walk in my statutes. And you will be careful to observe my ordinances. And you'll live in the land that I gave to your forefathers. So you will be my people, and I will be your Elohim. That's just like really the terms are the same with the old covenant. Okay, we're going to be obedient because the Father is going to make us obedient. Let's finish at least this part of the covenant. Verse 11, and they shall not teach everyone his fellow citizen and everyone his brother, saying, know Yahweh, for all shall know me, from the least to the greatest of them. All who were saved will know Elohim and his Torah, because it will be fully written on their hearts and on their minds. That's the salvation given to his people. You aren't going to be saved from your sins. You are going to be saved from sinning. Okay? To be saved from our sins. Oh, that's such a great thing. I can do whatever I want. I'm saved. No. No, he's going to give you a heart and a mind to where you're not going to like sin. Okay? What you're going to like are his things. That's what you're going to want. That changes things. And his people will not need to, you don't have to tell them, well, you need to know Yahweh. Because from the least of them to the greatest of them, they're all going to know him. And what do they mean by know him? To know him is to be obedient to him. That's how you know him. We're told in 1 John 2, starting at verse 3. By this we know that we've come to know him if we keep his commandments. You could stop right there. Okay? Could stop right there. But I'm not going to. But it could stop right there. The one who says, I've come to know him and does not keep his commandments is a liar, and the truth is not in him. But whoever keeps his word, in him the love of Elohim has truly been perfected. By this we know that we're in him. The one who says he abides in him ought himself to walk in the same manner as he walked. So it says you should walk just like Messiah if you say you know him. Beloved, I'm not writing a new commandment to you, but an old commandment which you had from the beginning. The old commandment is the word which you've heard. That's just the old Torah. The old Torah. The old rugged Torah. How about that instead of the old rugged cross thing? Anyway. Verse 12. For I will be merciful to their iniquities, and I will remember their sins no more. We receive a righteousness through the blood of our high priest that we can't attain in our own accord. Because of this, Elohim will remember our lawless deeds no more. Jeremiah 33, verses 7 and 8 says, and I'll restore the fortunes of Judah and the fortunes of Israel, and I'll rebuild them as they were at first. And I will cleanse them from all their iniquity by which they've sinned against me. And I'll pardon all their iniquities by which they've sinned against me and by which they've transgressed against me. Isn't it easier to forgive that son or daughter who really desires to do what you say and what you want? How easy is it to forgive that child? Very easy. Very easy. How easy is it to forgive that child who is intentionally rebellious? Very hard. Yep. Then you reach a point to where forgiveness is not attained. Okay? Jeremiah 50, verse 20 says, in those days and at that time, declares Yahweh, search will be made for the iniquity of Israel, but there will be none, and for the sins of Judah, but they'll not be found, for I shall pardon those whom I leave as a remnant. Micah 7, verses 19 and 20, he will again have compassion on us. He'll tread our iniquities underfoot. Yes, you will cast all their sins into the depths of the sea. You will give truth to Jacob and unchanging love to Abraham, which you did swear to our forefathers from the days of old. Acts 13, verses 38 and 39. Therefore, let it be known to you, brethren, that through him forgiveness of sins is proclaimed to you. And through him everyone who believes is freed from all things from which you could not be freed through the Torah of Moses. See, we needed something more than the Torah of Moses. Why? Because of me. Because of you. It's that imperfection. Everything we touch gets imperfected. Well, we're in the process of changing that. We already have a perfect Heavenly Father. We have a perfect priesthood. We have a perfect high priest. We have a perfect tabernacle. We have a perfect mercy seat, Ark of the Covenant. What we needed was a new agreement with the Father. Verse 13, when he said a new covenant, he made the first obsolete, but whatever is becoming obsolete and growing old is ready to disappear. You know, a lot of people will try and tell you, well, you know, the Hebrew word there for new also means renewed covenant. No, it doesn't. It has to in its context. The word can be that, but it has to, in its context, be that. Distinctly stated that way, okay? For instance, if it said we're going to rebuild and renew the covenant, okay, then that would fit. But that word in and of itself, say renewed covenant, is not right. It's not correct. It's not proper Hebrew grammar, and I'm going by those that know the Hebrew language, not by my account. And you know what? We don't need to redo the old covenant. Okay? We don't need to redo the old covenant. This New Year's resolution is not what we need. We need the Father to work a miracle in our hearts and minds. That's what we need. That is something new. That's like it says in Deuteronomy. Elohim says, oh, that they had a heart to do my will. It's the only thing they're missing. Oh, that they had that heart to do his will. That was the only thing they were missing. They had everything else, 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes, 2 ears. But they didn't have that heart to do his will. That comes through the new covenant. Well, we couldn't fulfill our part of that old bargain. So this old covenant, this old agreement, it's old and it has to vanish away. Now, the reason much of the Brit Hadashah, the New Testament, is misunderstood is because definitions of the Old and New Covenants are not known and not taught. Okay? I try to make it a point to pound the definition of what the Old Covenant is and what the New Covenant is. It is very important. If you understand just those 2 things, what's the Old Covenant, what's the New Covenant, everything will fit into place. Then you know what sin is. Then you know what righteousness is. Then you know about our proper relationship with the Father. All these things, if we learn what this new covenant is, we're not battling to try and keep the Torah, okay, like they did in days of old. We've erroneously been taught that Elohim changed his mind on definitions of what's right and wrong. and that now we can ignore it. That's a false and deadly teaching. But it's only taught to 2 billion people in this world presently. The replacement with that old covenant, that old agreement, with a new covenant of salvation comes through our high priest and our master, Yeshua or Yehoshua Messiah. Any questions, any thoughts on Hebrews 7 and 8?